Right. Good morning, everybody. We will get started. Welcome to the Senate Study Committee on Access to Affordable Childcare. And we have some other members that may trickle in, but my vice chair, Chairman Brass, is with us today. We are in his committee room. And so I think the best thing to do to get started is to have Chairman Brass open us up in a word of prayer. Since it didn't have any walkout music, he at least can give us a startup prayer. How about that?
You want me to sing?
No,
I can sing for you.
You can sing a hymn instead. How don't you do that?
You want me to sing the national anthem?
You wanted to get out before noon, didn't you?
Yeah.
All right, let's get started.
All right. Y'all bow your heads with me. Dear Lord, thank you for this day. Thank you for all that you do for us. And just be with us and guide us as we look into the needs of Georgians and specifically our Georgia children. In your name we pray. Amen.
Amen. Thank you for doing that. So I would venture to say there are probably more exciting, newsworthy committees going on at this Capitol, maybe even some today. But I think that also, of course, with the backdrop, this committee will be meeting over the next few months with a little bit of stuff going on politically in the world. There'll be a lot of things that'll get a lot of attention over the next few months. But I don't know if there's anything that is happening at this Capitol right now, in my opinion, that impacts more people on a day-to-day basis than the topic we're going to study. And so I thank y'all for participating. Thank you to everyone that signed up or agreed to sign up to speak today. And the plan is, so far, is to have a hearing course today. We're going to today kind of dive into what I would call kind of a high-level discussion about how issues with access to child care impacts the state as a whole, how it impacts employers. You're going to hear a lot of numbers, I'm assuming, today. And some of our speakers may dive a little bit deeper into that. But the one thing you don't see on the agenda is someone that struggles with this every single day. Though some of our speakers may struggle with this every single day, some of us on this committee, well, both of us today, have young children and with two working parents that deal with this every single day. But for most people that struggle with access to affordable child care, they are having to make decisions every single day about whether they take a promotion, whether they can work outside the home, whether one parent's going to stay home or both parents may have to stay home for periods of time, whether they have to move to different locations to be closer to family that can help them with child care. Even if they can afford the cost of child care, maybe there's nowhere where they live that even offers child care they can sign up for. And so the person that we're not going to hear from is the person that deals with this the most. But my hope is that with this study committee, I know we're not going to offer a grand solution from the state of Georgia to solve this issue. But I hope that what we do is we learn as a committee, and then we recommend to the entire Senate and share our findings with the entire Senate. We learn about what this does to the work environment, the business environment in our state. We learn about how this affects big businesses, small businesses. We learn about what nonprofits out there are doing to help solve this problem. We learn hopefully from each other on that. We learn what we can do as a state to help them. Maybe we learn about money left on the table that the state, federal government's offering we're not using. Maybe we learn from other states. Maybe we learn from private employers. We learn what they're doing to offer solutions, and we can hopefully encourage other employers to do things to offer solutions for this problem. And so while I know we won't come out with this recommendation that's going to solve the issue, I believe it's important this is a major focus for us as a committee, major focus for the Senate. And I want to start by also thanking the Lieutenant Governor for setting this committee up, for appointing me as chair, for even including Vice Chair Brass on the committee. This comes from the overall priority our Lieutenant Governor and our Senate has put on focusing on children and families. As you know, we started a committee, I believe it was 2 years ago now, the Children and Families Committee chaired by Chairman Kirkpatrick. And that committee has done a lot of work already to address issues that affect everyday working families in our state, affect children in our state, and this continue that effort with this committee here today as well. And so with that, I will ask Chairman Brass, do you have any opening comments you want to make?
No, well, I'll say this. I was just meeting with a longtime friend of mine, Shane Gann. He's been with the YMCA's for over 20 years and works at our local YMCA in Noonan, but also covers some of our metro Ys around the loop. And you know, I think there's lots of opportunities out there, and as we often see in government, you know, just filling those gaps and figuring out how we as a state and how we as a government can help fill those gaps, and really a lot of times just connect those dots. You know, you may have a program out there that serves a certain area, but they may be lacking, you know, maybe the transportation is the piece that nobody can seem to figure out. And so maybe it's things like that we as a state and we as a state government can come in and just help assist. But look forward to learning from, really learning what all's out there, and then two, figuring out how we can assist in that. And so as a father of 3 children with myself and my wife both working, I do know that childcare after school is can be a tough puzzle to put together. So look forward to solutions, Mr. Chairman.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And like I said, we have some committee members that'll be joining us as we go. And I know she's probably out of breath from making it in, but I'll recognize Senator Parent if you want to make any opening remarks for the committee as well.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. It's so good to see everybody. I'm Senator Elena Parent. Right now, my number is 42, but he's getting that one.
That's right.
So now it'll be 44, starting in January. So I'm very pleased to be on this particular committee, early childhood education, affordable child care, and the birth to 5 years is a topic that I've long been interested in, which some of you know pretty well. I've always been very interested in our CAPS program and have tried to elevate that with the budget and with my colleagues. So just really pleased to learn more. Thanks for all devoting time to this.
Thank you. Appreciate it, Senator Parent. Thank you for being here today as well. And as you see, as I mentioned earlier, once again, the Lieutenant Governor, I think, stacked this committee with some of us that have personal experience dealing with this, as Senator Parent, I know, does as well.
I do.
And raising young children while working, with her husband working as well. And so appreciate the work you've done in the Senate, and of course, great to have you on this committee. All right. With that, we will jump into our agenda. And first on the agenda is Mindy Benderman, who's Executive Director of GEARS, and I'm sure she's going to tell us about GEARS overall. We appreciate the work that your organization does. Thank you so much for being willing to share with us in this committee. I'm going to turn that podium mic on, and you're welcome to either present up there or down here, wherever you're more comfortable.
I'm going to present down there, then.
Okay, come on down
Too
here.
far away.
That is fine. I'm going to turn whatever you're more comfortable with.
Good afternoon. Good morning.
Good
Sorry,
morning.
It's not afternoon yet. Just
Pick
a
one of
long
those
morning.
mics. You can do mic 3 if you want. That's fine.
There we go. Good morning, everyone.
Morning.
And Mr. Chairman, thank you so much for your remarks. I'm also a mom. My kids are now grown, but I can remember how hard it was how much I worried about them when they were very young and my husband and I were working, and then Senator Brass in the afternoons trying to arrange that very complex puzzle once school started as well. So I've been where you are, and many of us have, and I appreciate you also pointing out the fact that we don't have someone who necessarily will speak from the perspective of a parent yet, and I'm glad you'll hear from that later. But GEARS, our organization, is a nonprofit. We work throughout the state of Georgia on high-quality, affordable early education experiences for children birth to 5, high-quality health and development services, and family well-being. The idea is that children live in the context of a family, and their family needs to be happy and healthy and employed and all of those things as well for kids to thrive. GEARS works specifically with kids and their families birth to 5. We don't work on that after school age, the school age care, and I hope you'll hear from some of those experts later as well. Yeah. No. Oh, there we go. Well, that's okay. This is a group of headlines that have been between the pandemic and now. I know you've seen some of these headlines in your own papers. I know that you're hearing from constituents with similar concerns about struggles with employees and employers who can't find employees due to childcare challenges. I know you've experienced some of these issues yourselves and your own families. Parents are shouldering the bulk of the burden when it comes to childcare. And the one I love is why no one can hear parents screaming. The pandemic has brought that into sharp relief, but again, these issues have continued. They were in existence before the pandemic, and they're certainly in existence now. There is pre-K in Georgia, but only for our lottery-funded pre-K is only for 4-year-olds, and there are some programs that help hardworking, low-income families in Georgia, like CAPS and Head Start, but the gaps are huge. Parents are reporting high levels of stress since the pandemic, and we know from educators that children are coming to childcare with more and more issues that need to be addressed. The good news is that Georgia has long been a leader in early education. Georgia's lottery-funded pre-K program began as a pilot program serving about 750 at-risk children, 4-year-olds, in 20 sites in 1992. But by 1995, the state made this a free, universal pre-K program, meaning still today that any family with a 4-year-old can sign their children up for a lottery-funded pre-K classroom in Georgia. We were the first in the nation, and we're rightfully proud of that program. Studies have shown that our Georgia pre-K program makes a difference. A longitudinal study shows that our pre-K students are experiencing far more success in literacy skills and other skills than those who did not attend pre-K. But we still have a lot of work to do. There are 732,500 children under the age of 6 in Georgia, and 68% of those have either both of their parents or their only parent in the workforce. And without access to high-quality childcare, parents are unable to work. Children are often cared for in poor, unregulated environments. And we know that employee absences and turnover affect employers' bottom lines, and you'll hear more about that from additional speakers later. The impact on the state of Georgia is tremendous. Childcare leads to over $1.7 billion with a B dollars in losses, and an additional at least $105 million in lost tax revenue annually. We also know that high-quality experiences in a child's first years of life make an impact on everything that is to come in their lives later. And that's because it's a period where our brains develop at a tremendous rate of rapidity. Children make about 1 million neural connections per second in those early years. Again, this is in the quality of the interactions they have with adults in their lives matter. That means the quality of their teacher interactions, their parents, if parents are highly stressed, that impacts children's early brain development. We know that all of this means that the wiring that it's formed in those early years, whether it's weak or whether it's strong, is really what it serves as the foundation for all future learning. You can't have a do-over in early childhood. We've got to get it right the first time. We also know that there is a tremendous return on investment for early childhood. Research conducted by Dr. James Heckman, who's a Nobel Prize-winning economist in Chicago, indicates that investing in early education provides a significant return on investment. Every dollar invested in high-quality early education saves on average $13 down the road as a result of reduced crime rates, lower demand for social services, and increased tax revenue. Studies continue to show that children who have high-quality, affordable early childhood experiences in those early years are more likely to read at grade level, they're more likely to graduate from high school, and more likely to be successful in their adult lives, in employment and in family. We also, at Gears, conduct frequent surveys of parents with children under age 5. And there are some highlights. These are highlights from our study from late 2023 that found in the past year that 8 in 10 families have struggled to afford a basic need like diapers, housing, food. This is families of all income levels that were surveyed all around the state. Only 32% of the families that were surveyed with kids under 5 believe that the state government is doing a good job meeting the needs of parents with young children. And less than half of families indicate that things are going well in terms of their stress level and mental health. Again, families are struggling. That headline before, families are screaming and no one is hearing them, we continue to see that. One of the reasons for that is because childcare is expensive. The average yearly infant tuition exceeds in-state tuition at a 4-year public college in Georgia. And remember, these are families who are just starting out their families and careers. They have less seniority. They have less ability to take time off. They have less disposable income. For families with low income, childcare expenses represent more than 1/3 of their earnings. 1/3. Federal HHS says that childcare should cost 7% of a family's earnings. So we're far exceeding that. And families continue to tell us things like childcare costs today are not affordable. Any aid to supplement childcare costs is paramount to growing the economy. And parents need help paying daycare fees. I want another child, but there's no way I can afford that. We can't keep our heads above water financially. So I want to just give a little bit of an overview as you start to study this issue, because childcare is a really complex space, and families use all kinds of care to meet their childcare needs. They might use licensed childcare center, which is, again, a center license that serves a multitude of children in various classrooms. Many of those private childcare centers also have Georgia pre-K classrooms, because our lottery-funded pre-K is a mixed delivery system, meaning that you can have a Georgia pre-K classroom in a public school or a private setting. Families have that choice. Families might also use part-time care at a church faith-based program or another Mother's Morning Out program. They might use a family child care home. Family child care homes are licensed. They can serve up to 6 non-related children for pay. They might, though, use friend, family, neighbor care, which is not licensed, which is informal care. They might have a nanny. They might go underground and use unlicensed, unregulated care. They face wait lists, especially for infants, especially for high-quality care that's affordable in various areas of our state. And they might, if they're lucky, have on-site licensed child care at their workplace. And hopefully you'll highlight some of those benefits to employees and employers. But it's a complex system. And as you guys know, because you have kids, when you get pregnant and start thinking about childcare, there are a lot of decisions to make. But for many families, the decision is what's available, what can I travel to, what can I afford? This is just another graphic that shows the types of early learning systems that I just described throughout Georgia. There are some initiatives to make childcare more affordable in Georgia. We've talked about Georgia's pre-K program, which again is lottery funded, available for anyone with a 4-year-old who registers their child based on slots available, but and so they might not necessarily be able to enroll their child in their first choice sometimes of a location, but if families are flexible, they usually can find a Georgia pre-K slot. Again, these are continually found to be high quality. We are so proud of the changes and improvements to Georgia pre-K that the legislature made last year, and we thank you for those. We think those are really important. The second program we want to highlight is Georgia's CAPS program. These are child care scholarships that are available to low-income working families in Georgia. To qualify for a CAPS scholarship, family eligibility is set at 50% or below of the state median income. That's low. Families also have to participate in 24 hours of approved activities that include work or education. Senator Parent knows as well, because she helped ensure that getting a 4-year degree was made you eligible for a CAP scholarship. At the same time, though, due to limited funds, DeKalb has priority groups. So you really can't get a CAP scholarship even if you're at 50% of the state income and even if you're doing these work activities unless you meet one of these priority groups, which include being very low income, being a foster family, or a grandparent raising grandchildren, a child with disabilities, children in DFACS custody, and several other priority groups. That gets you to the front of the line, and after that, really, the money runs out. In fact, only about less than 15% of eligible children in any one year receive a CAP scholarship due to funding shortages. So while this is a really critical program, there's much more that we can do to support the program and support Georgia's hardworking, low-income working families. So we're really happy that you've taken on this committee, these issues. We think they're critically important. We're looking forward to hearing the speakers today and participating in your other sessions. We hope that in the end you'll focus on these 3 priorities in particular, which include the high cost of quality care and addressing affordability and quality for families who need the care, the economic impact of child care challenges on Georgia's families and Georgia's employers, and additionally, how we recruit and retain the child care workforce, because, again, they are critical to making sure that children have high-quality experiences. We think that there are some things you can do, including adding capital funding, a pool of capital funding to increase the access to childcare. We think that we can look at adding the childcare workforce potentially as a priority for CAPS eligibility. We think, again, CAPS funding is critically important, and incentivizing employers as well to help be even more of a part of the solution. So as we look forward to the speakers that come, I know specifically today you're going to focus on the economic impact of these challenges, and I'm happy to answer any questions, and I'm always available.
Thank you. And just so everybody knows, for all the speakers that are speaking today, I told them today is really about introducing the problem, which may sound a little crazy to anybody watching us because we know there's a problem. But I think we have to formally talk about the issue itself and outline from a high level the problem and the many layers of that problem. And so thank you you did just that. And I want to encourage everyone to not be shy about sending us the solutions, obviously, too. You're not hearing today us diving as deep into that, but you already outlined a couple things, which is there's 2 programs already there, CAPS program and the lottery-funded pre-K, that we could do more in, not just more money, but also maybe some other changes with eligibility. And so I'm interested to hear more opportunities you see moving forward that we could do to build upon those 2 programs. And also, I'd also be interested to hear what other states are doing. Other states, do they have similar programs like we have? How do they run those? Is there something else we're leaving out as a state as well? So with that, any questions from the committee? Senator Parent.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you so much, Mindy. In terms of setting the stage of the problem, and maybe someone else is going to speak about this, so if that's the case, we can wait. But it might be useful for the committee to unpack a little bit more why the economics of childcare don't work, both from the family side, the provider side, and the childcare worker side, because it's really a problem not just for one category of that whole system. It's for everybody.
It's a great question, and I can spend a lot of time talking about it, so I'm just going to give a quick overview. Childcare tuition is expensive for a couple of reasons. Number one, to care for especially very young children, infants in particular, we need low ratios. We need low ratios both to keep, and that means teacher-to-child ratios, both to keep children safe, right? Think about how hard it is to care for one infant. Think about, so both to keep children safe, but also to provide those high-quality experiences we talked about. To maximize brain development, A caretaker, a teacher needs to be on the floor with children, speaking what we call serve and return, talking to them, listening to them. You can't do that when you're playing zone and trying to care for too many kids. So not only do we want to keep kids safe, but we want to provide high quality experiences, and we need trained teachers to do that. So those ratios are critically important, but they also add to the expense of infant toddler care. As kids get older, ratios are a little bit bigger, which is developmentally appropriate. But again, one of the primary costs is high quality teachers, which again provides high quality experiences. We also have overhead and all of those things. We should say that the CAP subsidy does not cover the whole cost of childcare, even for low-income working parents. Low-income working parents still have to pay a portion of childcare fees. So that's also a challenge for low-income families. So we have the cost of care, the cost of providing quality. Basically, other than CAPS and pre-K, remember that families are responsible for tuition. This is a tuition-based program, right? If you aren't at 50% of state median income, unless you get some small subsidy from an employer, and very few employers do that, you are paying the whole cost of your tuition, which is expensive. It's also expensive for providers to provide childcare. In addition to rent and employee costs, they've got to pay insurance, all of the things that go into, again, providing a high quality environment. I should also say that early educators are among our lowest paid professionals. Many of them average about $12 an hour. If you think about all they do, they can't work remotely. They are on 24/7 while they are at a child care provider. And the retention of these high quality teachers is of critical importance to our field. Many of them are working without time off, without benefits. They're choosing this because they love children, but we're also seeing many of them leave after just a couple years. And so again, we've got to address that as well.
Thank you. Anything else from the committee? All right, thank you.
Thank you so much.
All right, next we have also from Gears, Hannah Goldberg. Dr. Goldberg, come on up. You're welcome to sit there or use the podium, either way.
Where do you want to be, Tim?
And Tim, are you going to share? Y'all going to share the time?
We're gonna share a little bit. Tag team. That's
All right, also have Tim Carroll from Metro Atlanta Chamber of Commerce. And so I'll just turn it over to y'all however you want to handle it.
Great. Thank you, Chairman, so much for having us. I think that our slides are at the very end, just right after Mindy's last slide. Well,
Let's get it back on there. Do you want to do your slides later, Tim? Okay.
Yes, please.
So we go
Thank you.
back to the first presentation. All right. There's a little bit of delay, I think, in the clicker. Maybe not. All right.
Yes, sir.
sure.
Good morning, Chairman, members of the committee. Tim Carroll, Senior Director for Talent at Metro Atlanta Chamber. I oversee our programs and policy related to workforce and education.
And Hannah Goldberg, Research and Policy Director at Gears. Really excited to follow up Mindy's comments and be here with my friend and colleague Tim to talk to you just a little bit about the economic impact of childcare challenges.
Great. So I thought I'd talk a little bit about why we teamed up, why the Metro Atlanta Chamber and Gears teamed up. When the Chamber started looking at early education policy back in, 2015 now, we realized it was important for employers, but that we were missing a lot of the story. It was very important to us as an economic development organization that we partner with an organization grounded in data and research, but an organization that also has a pulse on parents and the providers of childcare. If we were going to move in this space and try to do something reasonable, it made sense to partner with that type of organization. Gears, of course, was the natural fit for us on that. We're very thankful for that. So I'll talk a little bit about the report and kind of where we went with this. So This was the first in a series of reports focused around the economic impact of childcare. If you think about it from economic development standpoint, this makes kind of complete sense, right? You start with a place of data, look at how does it impact the state, both in revenue and tax revenue, and then you figure out what are recommendations that we have from various groups to change that number. Whether it's not, everything obviously is not on state policy. Some of it's on employers to do. There was some higher education recommendations that came out of this research. There was, of course, state policy recommendations that included the legislature. One of the things we're really happy about, I think since we started this in 2016 and published later, is that a lot of those recommendations have been moved on. Everything from pre-K to some of the higher education movements that we saw. Very happy, especially around paid leave and some of these other very monumental pieces of policy that's been enacted. So we're here today to just kind of continue that conversation and pick up where we've left off with the research.
Thanks, Tim. So just to contextualize this for you, and those of you with children probably know these disruptions very well, but when we're thinking about childcare challenges that parents experience, we categorize them into both short-term and long-term disruptions. So short-term disruptions are things like, you miss a day of work because your child is sick or your childcare arrangements fell through. If you are enrolled in a school or work training program, you may also miss days of school. And what we found when we did this study is that students were actually missing so many classes that they were not completing their full term of work, right? So when we calculated it, it ended up being close to 3 weeks of missed class time, which is really significant if you think about how important that, in-person instruction is for students. Short-term disruptions also include things like arriving late or departing early. Again, working parents know this very well, and this can be disruptive both to the employer and to the employee. We also know that parents experience long-term disruptions, and we asked in a fair amount of detail about this in our work. We found that parents may quit a job or school or work training program. They also turn down advancement opportunities, and this one can be a little bit more difficult to quantify, and we'll talk about that in just a minute. We also find that parents are moving from full-time to part-time or drastically reducing their hours because of unreliable childcare or challenges with childcare. And we also found that 1 in 20 parents that we surveyed reported actually being fired from their job because of challenges with childcare. And all of that led to, thanks to the chief economist at the Metro Chamber, our big economic impact analysis. And I'll let Tim talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, so what we were able to do is take some of those disruptions that have national and state multipliers and apply that on a very conservative end. As you know, when you do these types of comparisons, there's always a range. We stuck to the conservative end on that. So the numbers that you're seeing here are at the far conservative range on what we think the impact was in 2017, 2018. So you can imagine with the changes that have happened since 2017 and 18, these numbers are probably exacerbated quite a bit. We probably should talk a little bit about why we haven't repeated this research. Obviously, there's been some disruptions in the market and in changes to income and household. We needed to let that calm down before we tried to establish some type of new trend again. But again, it's really important when you're talking about $2 billion in overall revenue and over $100 million in tax revenue for the state. That's a huge impact, especially when we were thinking about the numbers that Mindy talked about earlier on the overall impact and costs and the population that we're talking about.
Thanks, Tim. And, again, we think of this as a floor, and that our state could be, potentially $2 billion stronger, our state's economy, if we address some of these childcare challenges. And as Tim mentioned, we haven't conducted the economic impact analysis piece of this for several years, but GEARS has been consistently commissioning polls and surveys of families with young children, and we see that the problems haven't gotten better, they've gotten worse, right? So when we asked in 2018, we asked parents if they had quit a job, not taken a job, or greatly changed their job because of issues with childcare. We had about 26% say that they had in the last 12 months. We asked that again in 2021, and again here we thought, well, maybe we're seeing the impact of the pandemic come through. That number was 34%. We asked it again at the very end of last year, beginning of this year, and you can see that that is now more than 1 in 3 parents who are saying that they've experienced this type of disruption to their employment, to their education because of challenges with childcare. And to add a little bit more color to that, again, we see more than 1 in 3 saying that they or their spouse or partner had to leave the workforce altogether because of childcare challenges. 2/3 are saying that they had to miss a shift at work or reduce their hours because of childcare challenges. And then almost half are turning down a job opportunity because of problems with childcare. So this is significant. It is affecting student parents, it is affecting employees, and it's definitely affecting employers' bottom line. And so we will continue to look at these issues, but we know that there are solutions that can address some of these challenges, both from the employer perspective, from a policymaker perspective, and as Tim mentioned before, also higher ed. Tim, anything that you'd want to add here before I know you need to transition to your slides?
No, I just think the thing I would point out is just the obvious, that especially that middle one when you talk about a shift or reduce of hours, just the impact that has had over the past 4 years, and how that number probably is exacerbated even on the employer side, and trying to deal with multiple locations, multiple types of work, is just creating a lot of chaos for both parents and employers.
I have one question on, and you may not know this right now, but do we have any data from other states or nationally like this that we can compare? Because we're all the time comparing ourselves to other states. Or is this normal in our country, or are we an outlier in any way?
That's a great question. And in terms of the economic impact analysis, there are a number of other states that have followed suit. And so we do have numbers that we can compare there to other states. And I would say that Georgia is in the higher group in terms of the bottom line to the state. I think that you see these challenges nationally, but I will be honest with you, I was surprised that the numbers were as high as they were when we did our latest survey. This was very end of 2023. We thought that some of the disruptions from the pandemic would have settled, and parents are still struggling. As Mindy said, they're still screaming and we're not hearing them, and so we were really surprised and disheartened by our latest survey results.
I'd also be curious, especially with like these numbers here, what we see with other states. It's hard on the big dollar figure, because it depends on how much economic activity is in that state, right?
That's
but
right.
I feel like these percentages, I wonder if we're an outlier anywhere there. And then also for Georgia, there's Metro Atlanta and there's the rest of the state. We talk about all the time with healthcare, the challenges in rural Georgia, and I'm just wondering, when it comes to these numbers, if we see people in rural Georgia affected in a bigger way as well.
That's a great question. And we do have some additional analyses that we can share with you that break it down by region where the cell size is large enough. There were about 500 parents who participated in this, but we see that the challenges are not specific to the metro area. We see them in rural and suburban areas as well.
Sure. Thank you.
If there aren't any other questions, I'm going to turn it over to Tim so he can do the rest of his presentation. Thank you for letting us share the stage this morning.
All right, so I'm just going to pick up kind of where we left off there. I'm not going to rehash the report part. I do want to talk about kind of some overall state numbers and where we're sitting. Some interesting things, 2019 to 2022, and apologize for the 2 years in the rear. We're just about to get the 23 numbers, I think, in about a month. Our median household income has gone up about $12,500 since 2019. But if you think back to Mindy's first presentation and think about the cost of childcare, particularly for young children, and if you have multiple children in a household, you can imagine that $12,500 is pretty much wiped out for those particular families. I do want to point out that this is just the median. It is not evenly distributed. It changes depending on where you are in the state. It changes around the makeup and the demographics of your particular family. So that is just the median. The ownership, I don't think this is necessarily eye-opening for those who have been following what's happening with the housing market in the last 4 years, but there is a shift from rentership to household. But I do want to focus in on the rental side for a minute, just because these numbers are getting worse. The rental percentage of income for rent has increased. But that 23% I want to highlight. 23% of families with children under the age of 6 are spending more than 50% of their income on rent. That is a huge marker, and it continues to go up year over year. So it is something that we should maybe take a deeper look at, just as a side note to there. I want to shift now. We talked about, from the employer side, these headlines we've kind of seen every day. This is why it sort of creates a problem when we're trying to collect data. The shift on what's happening in office work, the shift on consolidation, and a number of other things are just like we've seen the change on ownership and rentership. Employers are going through the same thing, whether that's distribution, whether it's office space. There's a lot of things happening. The interesting thing I'll point out, the data that's coming out of some of those shifts, particularly on return to work, entry-level employees, for the most part, don't have the option, right? They have to go in. They've got to do the work. They have to keep the job. Where we're seeing attrition happen is for the management and executive roles. Those are actually the ones not returning to work. Creates a huge problem for employers to try to backfill those positions and figure out how do we realign pathways internally. Just want to lay that out there as we talk about return to work. It sounds like sort of a cut and dry situation. It is not. There's a lot of issues that fall out of that, not just on the HR side, but on the physical side. We did a survey. We have a group of HR professionals that feed into my work and help inform the policy work that we do. The large disclaimer I'll put here is thinking about the companies that we serve and our investors are mostly large companies. That said, they have a huge employee base here in Georgia, but many of them are also global and national companies. So keep that in mind. We're not talking about small businesses for the most part. These are large companies. For the recent survey we did of 17 of our companies, their average days in office was 3.5 for those that have office-based work. Super varied. So if you can imagine, most of our companies have a customer-facing or a retail-facing component. Those employees obviously do not have the flexibility option, but for those that do, this was the average that they were saying was 3.5 days. Surprisingly, there's been little change in benefits packages over the last 5 years. They've kept them intact, and for most of them, they've expanded it in some way, shape, or form. That has a lot to do with just how tight the labor market is and trying to keep retention and attraction high for their company, trying to keep up with any changes that happen in the market. The flexibility, like I said, varies depending on the time and position, location, and all of those things. The industry absolutely matters, whether you are healthcare, if you're a distribution company, if you're dealing with customer travel, all of those things can change what that in and out of office or flexibility requirement looks like. Mindy talked about the challenges that parents face. So this volatility and this difference in workplace and difference in types of workplace situations only makes that problem harder. I'm thinking I didn't put it on this slide, but the changes in commute times that has happened even for many of our rural workers and rural families also plays into this as to why parents can or cannot do childcare in certain locations. So that's also a factor as well.
While you're on that topic,
Yes, sir.
Do you have anywhere in your surveys that would show what the average paid paternal leave is for some of these companies? What's being offered?
Yeah, we're trying to collect some of that now. So the problem that we're having now, just to be completely honest with you, is most of our companies have different work situations depending on the unit or location that you're in. So the benefits packages are not the same for every worker. It can vary a little bit by location. That creates reporting problems, obviously. So we're going to have to come up with like a structured report to make that sense. We also have the volatility and change in the market. It's going to make the numbers look a little strange if we tried to do that right now, year over year comparison. So we probably need to let that settle a little bit. The good news is the volatility side on the office situation appears to be calming down. I think hybrid flexibility is the new buzzword that they're calling it, with figuring out that in, out, team, remote, PTO versus non-PTO, all of those questions seem to be settling down. So we're hopeful in about a year we'll have enough calmness in that data that we can actually do an assessment like that and figure out where our company's actually sitting on this.
And the reason I bring that up in particular, it'd be great to know what's being done out there, but also we as the state with our employees this past session doubled the time we have for paid paternal leave, but I believe it's just at 6 weeks still versus federally, I think it's 12 federally, that was done several years ago. And we as an employer are also competing with private companies too, and so that's why I asked that question.
I appreciate that, and thank you for the paid leave as well. That was, just speaking personally, that was a bright spot, I think, in this policy landscape over the past few years, and seeing that move and the support from the state legislature has been very encouraging for many of our employers, particularly some of the smaller employers that were maybe on the fence about that. I think it was a really good signal from the state about what's worth investing from the
Right.
employer side, so I appreciate that.
Sorry, you can go ahead. I'll try not to interrupt you too much.
No, that is basically the end. So it was a good point. But very happy to be part of this conversation and very happy with the moves we're seeing on it. But we have a lot more work to do. Happy to partner with you on any of that.
Well, thank you to Metro Chamber. Thank you all for making this such a big initiative. You don't have to do this, and I appreciate you and your members having this priority and the work that you're doing and helping move the needle in our state like you are. And so I want to commend you all for what you're doing. Anything else from the committee? Mr. Secretary, Madam Vice Chair, I keep changing y'all's roles. Yeah, well, you weren't talking enough, so, or taking notes, but. Yeah, so made you secretary, so start taking notes. You got the minutes. All right, thank you. Appreciate it, Tim. All right, next on the agenda, Dr. McConnell, Director of Economic Development from Athens Clarke County Government. Come on up. You can either, like I said, to the podium or down here, either way.
I'll sit down here.
All right, thank you for being
Thank
with
y'all
us today.
so much for including me today.
Of course.
So having heard the great presentations from Gears and from the Metro Atlanta Chamber, I think what I'll do is sort of pivot and do a more focused one community approach and tell you a little bit about what things look like in Athens, what we're seeing, and then some of the things that we're working on. So I'll start by saying that to echo some of the previous speakers, every year we have a great group out of the UGA College of Public Health that does a big community survey of Athens Clarke County called the Athens Wellbeing Project. So the most recent data they have is from 2022, and the average cost per child monthly for daycare is between $900 and $1,300. So that translates to $10,800 a year to $15,600 a year. So that's just one very specific example of one community. When you think that our annual median household income is $45,900. So that it's astounding at the burden that people are bearing in order to have their children taken care of. And of course, that average covers the span of the different types of child care that Ms. Benderman was talking about earlier when she shared the statewide Gears data. So we have about 6,260 kids under age 5. Of that, we have 53 providers. 24 are child care learning centers, so they're definitely not on every corner. We have 12 family child care learning homes, so private people who take kids into their homes, and then 17 other providers, which basically those are all Clarke County School District early learning programs like Head Start and Pre-K. So the capacity of those providers is about 2,750. So if you think we have 6,260 kids under the age of 5 and 2,750 capacity. And then you think about Athens, you know, we're a really specialized community. We have a lot of healthcare, we have a lot of education, we have a lot of advanced manufacturing, biotechnology. We have a lot of inflow every day, especially from the rural counties that surround us. So just thinking about some of the differences between, you know, Metro Athens is a lot smaller than Metro Atlanta, but the difference between a metro and then those rural areas I worked in Hart County for a really long time, and I have a daughter who's 9. And when she was born, I was driving every day back and forth to Hartwell. And I thought, well, I'll just find a place for her in Hartwell, because then I can drop her off, and then I'll have her in the car with me on the way home. And my friends at Hartwell said, you know, Ilka, there's not like a Primrose on the corner. There's just really not that opportunity. Most of the daycare is either available through faith-based programs, or it's you find somebody who will care for your child in their home. So just thinking Athens has a limited number, but then we're also have a lot of people that are coming in for our workforce that are also struggling with childcare and trying to find spots for their kids where they know that they're well taken care of. And especially because one of our key sectors is advanced manufacturing. They're on shift work. So, you know, it's beyond the normal, you know, maybe 7 o'clock to 6 o'clock that a normal, you know, even bricks and mortar daycare might have. That's a whole nother special set of needs that people need for overnight work, early mornings, later evenings. So with that, I'll share an anecdote of when my daughter was in daycare. One morning, showed up to the daycare and the lights were off and the doors were shut. We thought, oh no, what are we going to do for the day? And, you know, of course, I'm lucky because I telecommute most of the time. And so, you know, it was a bit of a stretch just to make sure she was well cared for and occupied. But when I was in the parking lot, there were several other folks that drove in too. And I remember this one mother who had on a work shirt from ABB, that's one of our advanced manufacturers. She was just distraught. And I said, you know, are you okay? Do you have a place for your daughter? And she said, well, you know, our employer does like a 3 strikes type disciplinary policy. And if you're late or you have to be absent, then, you know, it's a mark against you. And she's like, I'm very worried. I don't know what I'm going to do with my child to make sure she's well taken care of today and still be able to balance work. So I think that experience is really important to think about just when you look at percentages of telecommuting, but there's so many jobs that can't telecommute, and being in person is really important. And especially when you think of advanced manufacturing or jobs that are really time specific, you have to be there or the thing that you're trying to do cannot get done. It's really important to families. So I want to talk a little bit about our team has done a biannual wage and benefit study of our employers the last couple of years. And we focus mostly on manufacturing and on healthcare because those are some of our largest employers. And one thing that we've seen, the first one that we did was in 2021, and then we did another one this past fall. And one thing we saw that Tim mentioned is, you know, a lot of the employers, as a result of the pandemic maybe, are starting to look at different benefits and things that they can do in order to attract and retain workers. And we've seen that too amongst our healthcare providers and also our manufacturers. You know, they're doing different things like bringing in meals, and they're trying to figure out who can telecommute and having flexible schedules or maybe 4-day work weeks. But one of the gaps that we've seen in both of those annual surveys is that there are no child care benefits that are being offered. The one exception that we have is Piedmont Athens Regional. They've partnered with a local daycare firm that runs several facilities within Athens, and they built, Piedmont Athens Regional worked with that provider and built a special daycare facility right next to the hospital that offers extended hours so that healthcare staff, who of course work 24/7, have a place where their kids know that they're well cared for and they're right next door so parents can drop off and pick up easily. But that was something that was really interesting to see.
Can I stop you on that? Do you know
Yeah.
why? Is there a particular reason you're told as to why that's not something that's considered a benefit that a lot of companies want to offer?
Yeah, I think they think that it's offered as part of like your HSA maybe, you know, and so it's just not something that they've decided to move into at this point.
Okay.
Yeah. So I want to share a couple of things that are happening in Athens. So with the ARPA funds that are coming through, Athens Hart County Mayor and Commission decided that they would focus a lot of those funds on sort of social support issues, affordable housing, mental health, child development, workforce and small business development. And so the Mayor and Commission are set to vote on September the 3rd. But one of the proposed grants will be to Quality Care for Children, which runs a program in Georgia called QCC Works, which basically works with healthcare providers to do business training and business coaching and to help connect them with sort of the logistics of how to run their businesses efficiently. Because many of them got into childcare provision because they love kids, and then kind of giving them some of the back end in terms of like software that can help them track their business, ideas financially for how to make sure that the numbers work for their business. So Athens-Clarke County has a proposed $300,000 grant to QCC to run that locally in our community, to work with up to 40 providers for the next 2 years on doing that for their business. So I'm very excited about that. I think it's very important for what we're seeing. Secondly, also within the pot of funds that have been allocated to workforce development, there's up to $150,000 proposed grant to the Georgia Cooperative Development Center, because one of the conversations among childcare providers and the nonprofit groups locally, like Family Connection communities and schools that support them, is that many of the smaller daycare providers who are running facilities maybe out of their home or on a smaller scale, they're each purchasing separately. So thinking about maybe some local supports that could help them, like cooperative purchasing, where, if the margins are very thin, then they're able to figure out how to buy things together collectively and be able to have the supplies that they need at a more effective rate than if they were each one individually sort of purchasing their items. So that's another grant that is being proposed to help create some of those collective organizations where different employers can work together and try to maximize by working cooperatively.
All right, any questions from the committee?
Well, I really appreciate y'all's attention to this issue. It's so important.
Thank you. And I was going to say, if you have any data you want to share with us from your survey, or want to share the whole survey with us, that might be good too, so we can learn. Athens is unique in that it's obviously not Atlanta, but it's what I would call a mid-sized region in our state, and so it has its own market. And I'd be curious what you're hearing and what you're seeing in your surveys that you're doing too.
I'd love to do that. I'll definitely follow up with that.
All right, thank you.
Thank y'all for having me.
Thank you. All right, last person on the agenda today is Ellen Cochran, President and CEO of Quality Care for Children. Ms. Cochran, how are you?
I am well, thank you. I'm going to follow everyone else's lead and just sit here.
You're good.
Sorry to everybody.
Whatever's
with my
more
back to you.
comfortable.
And I'm going to go ahead and give you these handouts.
All right.
So you have them for reference.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Pass that down to the secretary.
So I just want to start off by saying, Chairman Strickland, thank you for the invitation to speak today, to talk a little bit about what we do at Quality Care for Children, how we partner very closely with the state and the ways that we do that, the resources that are available, and what we hear from the child care community. So I just wanted to start off by saying the importance of this work, and I won't go too deep into it because I think Mindy did an incredible job. I just want to say that I used to work in another state in policy around K-12 education, and I got into this work because I recognized that as we talk about literacy and we talk about the K-12 system, we need to start talking at birth, right? Because we're not going to see literacy scores improve in Georgia until we start to provide a full system of high-quality early childhood experiences for children throughout the state. And so leading this committee, I think, is so critical, not just to the folks, to the working parents now, but to the future of our children here in Georgia. So thank you for leading that. So here's my clicker, right? Let me tell you a little bit about, for those of you that may not be familiar with Quality Care for Children, or maybe you have heard of us in the context of a state partner. So we are a statewide nonprofit organization, and our mission really is around supporting both child care providers and families so they have the resources they need to nurture and educate our youngest learners as they get ready into school and move into that next phase. I won't go too deep into, as I said, all of the things as to why this work is so important, because I think Mindy did an excellent work of setting the groundwork for that. But I will talk about, the three ways that we think about our work here in Georgia around supporting those families and supporting the child care community in doing that work. And so I'll talk about how we support the quality within that space, how we support access for families to have access to those early learning opportunities and to the resources they need, and the sustainability. And Ilka did a great job of setting me up by talking about some of the work we do at Quality Care for Children in the sustainability of those child care spaces. So let me just say, we are the child care resource and referral for half the state of Georgia. And my partners really wanted to make sure I talked a little bit about what that is. If you're not familiar with it, we are the state partner that provides training and technical assistance to providers who are working towards their quality rated improvement for the state, meaning their accreditation for quality. And we are that within 3 regions of the state. So while we're a statewide nonprofit, we serve as that with 3 different offices serving the north half of the state. The other CCR&Rs are Albany State University, Augustus University, and Savannah Technical College. And so we work closely together to make sure that we are teaching and working with the teachers and the administrators to make sure that they are reaching the highest quality they can. We also, as a nonprofit, do a lot of outside learning and opportunities. So for those of you that may have heard about the Literacy and Justice for All work happening in Marietta and in Atlanta, we are learning through that with our own coaches to do intentional language and literacy coaching to those communities to inform our work as a child care resource and referral throughout the state. Another thing that we really focus on in the quality space is recognizing that there is an importance in nutrition and access to high-quality nutrition. So we are the largest food sponsor in the state of Georgia, meaning that when you have kids in public school and they get the free and reduced meal, they get that through the CACFP program. We do that by doing the reimbursements for those in both family home child care providers and center providers who may not have the capacity to do those reimbursements on their own. So we work with 400 family child care providers as part of that work, making sure that children who would qualify for those meals can get them reimbursed. This is also a huge benefit to the providers who may be either charging more for families of that or providing those meals. And one thing I'll always say as you think about the nutrition work, just to lay that groundwork, is we've become sort of a national leader in the farm to ECE work, because I always say I can put the nutritious meals on children's tables, but if they don't like it and they don't want to eat it, it's really not any better off. And so we do a lot of work around creating edible gardens, creating access to local produced foods, and creating recipes and things to encourage the families and child care providers in that space. On increasing access, I hope everyone is familiar with 877 All GA Kids. We run, on behalf of the Department of Early Care and Learning, the call center that is available statewide for families to find quality child care within their communities. We do the referrals for families that call us. Part of that work, we are also a Georgia Gateway partner, meaning that if a family calls us, we can help them with their application to access other state benefits. Particularly, we focus on the CAPS application because we want to make sure that families who are eligible for CAPS can complete that application, complete it well, and be supported through that process. One of the things that people call us for, and you've heard, and we're going to continue to talk about affordability, as Mindy mentioned, only about 15% of our income-eligible families in Georgia receive the CAP subsidy. So we do a lot of individual fundraising. We work with local municipalities. We work with others to do scholarships for those that either may be not eligible for CAPS or have fallen off of CAPS, or honestly just work to provide work. This is a workforce retention and recruitment strategy because of the high cost of care. And so you will hear us do boost scholarships, like I said, with both municipalities and with individuals and fundraising, like the work that we've been doing in the city of Atlanta to do scholarships in that community. We do this in terms of both short-term emergency scholarships, for example, instances of domestic abuse, or we do fundraising to make sure that we can provide those situations, or when someone has fallen off a subsidy or needs support, or we do long annual scholarships with periodic eligibility checks. The other thing that we focus on, like I said, and Mindy said, is people are in a lot of different types of care, and some are in parental care. Nationally, about 50% of kids are not in licensed care, and so we set up a Georgia Parent Power to give text and encouragement to families around child development needs, and we do webinars that are driven by parent content. In fact, our next webinar is how to find quality childcare in your community, where we provide those opportunities for families to be able to learn and grow. As Ilka mentioned, I won't get into it too much, but the sustainability, I can talk all day long about the quality and the access, but if we don't have a robust space for families to access, and we don't have sustainable care in our communities, including our rural communities, we're not going to have people in those quality childcare experiences. And so, as Ilka mentioned, we have really focused over the last few years on also recognizing the importance of the business side of running a child care. We look at the iron triangle of that work when supporting children in those spaces, meaning we help them increase their revenue, maximize their enrollment, and eliminate bad debt by working with providers to automate their systems and get them set up. One of the things I always say is the purpose of this work is to make sure that they are sustainable businesses within communities. And so getting them access to things like, should they have a Georgia pre-K classroom? Are they in the CACFP program? Those are also ways that we mitigate all of the burden of the full cost of care going on to families. And so we do that coaching with the intentionality of recognizing that this is a parent care model of tuition-based pay. And so what can we do to help make them sustainable businesses that have access to all the revenue that's available to them? We also provide things like shared services through this work. So the Provider Resource Hub, where we have over 2,800 providers in the state of Georgia on there accessing discounts, putting jobs boards, working together to try to create so we don't have as many shortages throughout the state. So let me talk a little bit around, and I'm just going to talk high level around the supply, the cost, and what we hear from providers. So one of the things you'll see here is that pre-pandemic, you've seen that we've actually sort of rebounded a little bit in the space of how many licensed centers we have, while we've seen our family child care homes decrease over the last few years. The one thing I say about this is that we only know the licensed capacity of our child care providers. And so while we may have child care providers in communities, we don't know how many children they are regularly serving, if they have wait lists, if they have the capacity without calling or connecting to those providers. And so that's why we do what I'll share soon is surveys where we reach out to kind of find out what is happening with our child care providers, what does their enrollment look like, and that's just how we look at our enrollment here in Georgia is by their licensed capacity. So if you have a provider in your community that may be licensed for 100, they may not be serving 100, particularly now as we find that some of our providers are experiencing workforce challenges and are not able to fully staff their classrooms.
So those numbers come from a national report, I'm assuming.
They do. They come from Childcare Aware of America that gets their numbers from the state of Georgia.
So
Yeah. So
how
you'll hear
do-
the commissioner talk about that.
And how are we seeing nationally a trend for less family child care homes? Or at least, is this something happening nationally?
Yes. So one of the things that I will emphasize, and I heard, we'll continue to have the conversation about making sure that families have choice in the type of care that they need in their spaces. And family child care is a really critical choice for a lot of families. As you talk about whether we should have on-site care or different choices, a lot of families want to have child care closer to their homes, or they want to be in a smaller space, particularly some of our immigrant and refugee families, being able to have family child care in their home language, the necessity of that. And so this is a space that we are working on in our business sustainability work with partners. It's helping to start up and support family child care and sustain it throughout the state of Georgia as a valid choice for families. And, our Boost Scholarship program does provide those scholarships similar to the CAPS program to both family child care and to center-based care, which really lets some of our employees, for example, we've recently done scholarships scholarships for the city of Atlanta for the school system there. Those families can now choose where they want to take their care. It's not just one centralized location where they have to go, but they can pick quality care, because we say it has to be quality rated, that works for them within their communities. And I think that's an important part of the ecosystem to hold as you go through this study work. One of the things that we continue to hear about is the cost of childcare. And I know Mindy talked a little bit about why the cost of childcare is so much. I think it's important to put it into context around what does it look like here in Georgia. Again, this is national data from the Childcare Aware of America, who works with the whole network across the country of childcare resource and referrals. And so we recently came out with the 2023 data of the median cost of childcare. And you may be looking at it saying, my childcare was more than that. I will say that we see a wide range of that. I have childcare providers who charge around $100 a week, up to those who are charging, $1,800 a month. And so it's important to recognize this is the median cost of care for both family child care and center-based care. And what I wanted to point out is the increase in that care in just the last year. So inflation is hitting all of us. It is definitely hitting the child care community as those federal subsidies start to go away. They've had to, and we'll talk more about increasing tuition to meet the demands of their fixed costs. One thing I will just highlight for you is that the Department of Health and Human Services has said people should not pay more than 7% of their income on child care, which is why we've, the CAP subsidy is looking at that moving forward. I will say, if you think about $11,000, if that's 7% of your income and you're paying the full cost of that, that's $157,000 a year, right? So it is a system that really relies on parent pay, and it's one that is really eating into, as you've heard, family income. I do think it's important to note that I think a lot of times I sit in conversations and they say, well, the cost of care is so much. Why are teachers not making more, right? Teachers here, and I think you can see in different reports from folks from the U.S. Labor Bureau of Statistics, it looks at about $13 an hour. I think we have down to 12 for assistant teachers, up to 14 for lead teachers, and higher for our Georgia Pre-K program. But $13 is about, I have the specifics here, I think it's $13.43 from May of this last year. And so if part of the reason that happens is because there are so many fixed costs, as Mindy says, that the one place that providers have to make that cut, they can't make it on their liability, they can't make it on their ratios. It ends up being either they charge families more or they pay their staff less. And so that's why we see that challenge for providers who are forced to price the care not on what quality costs, but on what parents can afford. So because we are always looking at what are providers experiencing in Georgia, we think that we do a great job at Quality Care for Children of listening to our providers. And we know that we don't always know what the wait lists are or what the enrollment data is. We look at licensed care. And so we do an annual, we call it our pulse check, where we check in with our providers. We recently did this in March of 2024. And I want to just talk a little bit about what we heard and the process for that. So we had a response. You saw that the number of providers throughout the state is about 4,000. We had a really good response with 578 providers. I will talk about the impact of that, not as a statewide response, but as the response of those who elected to take the survey, right? So remember, this is a sample of 578 respondents. We had good representation out of, statewide, 159 counties, 111 responded, and 66% of those were child care centers, and 34 were family child care providers. So it was great to be able to hear from both of those perspectives. So let's talk about what we heard about tuition. Based on the numbers I shared, probably not surprising to hear that a lot of those providers within the last year had raised their tuition. 47% of them out of that sample size raised their tuition within the last year. And when we asked them about those that have decided to leave care, they said 42% of those that have left us has not been because they have matriculated to a different program. It is because their families were experiencing financial challenges, and the families had to make different choices based on the economics of the cost of childcare and rising tuition. We continue to hear that around wait lists. So of those that we surveyed, 59% of them said that they had a wait list, and 61% had seen those wait lists increase within just the last year from what they had before. And this gets to that teacher shortage challenge, right? So we have wait lists, and one of those reasons that we have those wait lists is because 68% of the centers who could serve more kids, family child care is capped at how many they can serve, 68% of them said that they could care for more children if they did not have a staffing shortage. Of those that said they had a wait list, 50% of them have 20 or more children on that wait list. Now, I can't say they're not the same 20 in different spots, but because of the sample of our size, you can see that there is demand for childcare across the state. And I just want to emphasize that our child care providers are not only providing quality early childhood experience, but 71% of them said, I am connecting my families to available resources within their communities. I'm helping them get connected to our partners in the space of food, housing, and medical assistance. So we did this before the final before all of the federal funding needed to be spent within the last year. It had to be spent by June of this year. Oh, that slide looked a little funny when I came up, but I can read off it. So when we asked about what's going to happen as we head into the year ahead, 65% of those who responded said that they will likely have to increase tuition again. Some of them had already done it, some of them hadn't, in June of 2024. 26% said that the end of the funding will impact their teacher wages. So that means that some of them had provided bonuses or stipends over the course of that space, and they're not going to be able to do that any longer as we move forward. 16% said they may have to serve fewer children because of those demands, and 12% feared that they may have to close their program. So I can give you the full link to that survey. Again, it is really a pulse check of our survey, but it gives you an idea that this is a great time to think about how we act to support, making sure we have a strong, stable, quality space across the state.
So you are a 501c3.
Yes.
Are you funded solely by private donations?
No, as I mentioned, we receive a lot of our funding, a majority of our funding through our partnership with the Department of Early Care and Learning. So the CCR&R work is funded entirely by the Department of Early Care and Learning. The call center is the state's call center that we run for them. And the nutrition program is CACFP reimbursements that we do through the state. And
Do you know how much you received from the state last year?
I don't want to quote it, so I will send it back to you.
Okay, I'm just
Yeah.
curious. On the literacy work you're doing, are y'all also working with the Georgia Council on Literacy as well? Are you working together?
We are not directly. We are working with the Rollins Center and with the school systems in Atlanta and in Marietta and the birthing hospitals as part of that work. But it is my hope that we will continue to learn and share and grow together. We do that work to inform our work as the CCR&R and working with providers.
It might be good if we could get you connected with them, because that's obviously been a big initiative for the Senate too, and just heard the great work you're doing, and
That would be great.
make sure maybe we're coordinating the right way together on that work.
That would be great.
Anything else from the committee? All right, thank you.
Thank you all for the time.
Appreciate you. That's everyone we had on the agenda. Before we wrap up, is there anybody from the public that came today that wants to be heard? All right.
I have a question, Mr. Chairman. Thank you. We have a letter from, who is this? Georgia Child Care Association.
Yes.
I just wanted to point that out to make sure that, the members of the committee have the opportunity to read it, because I guess we don't have.
Yes, I am the CEO of Georgia Child Care.
For the couple.
So you have that information there. Candidly, I'm new in my role. Excited.
Hold on one sec. Come to the mic. That way everybody can hear you.
Thank you.
You want us either stand there or down here, either way.
Either way. Candidly, I am new in my role, and so we were pleased to share that letter. And I don't know that I came prepared today to provide direct comments, except to say that we are excited that this is something that you're studying and look forward to partnering with you all going forward to provide the child care owner and director perspective. The letter shares some specific areas that we would ask that you take a look at going forward. But I think our partners today that shared have done a wonderful job of sort of outlining the problem. And we'd be excited to partner with you all on sharing some ideas that we have for solutions.
Awesome. Thank you, Ms. Bellany. Thank you for pointing that out, Senator Parent. And that is a great segue for me to say, we set the agenda today trying to, kind of, as I mentioned earlier, outline some of the issues that we're seeing from a higher perspective, if you will, from a higher level perspective. But I'd encourage anybody that is either here today or watches this committee online, whether now or in the future, if you want to be heard in the future meetings, please reach out to my office. And whether that be you want to provide testimony or offer any perspective, whether that be written or testimony in person as well, we'd love to hear from you. We do not have a set agenda as what we're doing moving forward. I have an idea of kind of where I would like to go moving forward with testimony, but it's not all set in stone. And I've had a couple people ask, there were 2 calls yesterday from the press, and the questions were, what are y'all planning on recommending? Give us a preview. And I said, truthfully, this is a real study committee. Not that they're not always real study committees, but a lot of times you have a study committee where you already have a direction you want to go. And we really want to learn. We have a lot to learn, and we also hope that we learn from each other, everyone that testifies today, so we can do a better job working together. We all share the same goal. And so I don't know what we're going to recommend. I've not started typing the report to submit to my committee yet.
That's great news. We're happy to contribute to that.
We want to learn from you. And so our plan is to have at least 2 more hearings, one in September, one in October. We're encouraged to try to stay around the Capitol. We're going to probably travel a little bit and maybe go out and possibly meet at a private employer that we haven't set this up yet, that could offer a place for us to kind of dive more into, as we heard earlier, what private employers are doing, not just the problem, but what they're doing to help with the solution. And then we're also hoping to go out and potentially tour some facilities, possibly have a hearing at a nonprofit that's offering services in our communities. And so we're going to travel a little bit, if y'all will stick with me. We'll get the rest of our committee out there too as we move forward with this. So,
well, thank you for sharing that. I mean, our organization represents child care owners and directors that can speak very directly to why the expense is what it is.
Right.
And I think, like we all acknowledge that it's very expensive, but there are key things that contribute to that. Staffing costs, as you've heard, insurance, rent, all of the things that are going up in our families are going up within our child care centers. And child care centers and providers of all different kinds are an important part of families. Like, they play a role in helping families stabilize, helping folks be able to get out in the community, work, and contribute. And so, their expenses are going up as well, and we look forward to contribute to helping to shape, some of the answers on that. So thank you for welcoming me up.
Thank you.
I appreciate you.
Yeah, awesome. All right, anything else from the committee? Secretary Brass?
Make a motion.
Vice Chair Parent? All right, with that, we are adjourned. Thank you.